Cancer. We all know someone who has had it. Maybe your mother, your uncle, your grandmother. When it comes to family, cancer really could be in your genes. If there was an easy way to find out, would you want to know? Hayes-Freeland has the simple test that just may stop cancer in its tracks.
I can look at my family photo album and get an idea where I got my nose, the shape of my eyes, and even the curves of my mouth. But what I didn't realize until recently was how much my family's health history, cancer history in particular, makes up who I am. My grandmother had breast cancer at a young age. So did her sister, my maternal great aunt. My mother was older, but she developed breast cancer in her 70s. Then, 4 years ago, my sister developed cancer of the appendix, an illness that took her life a year after diagnosis. There seemed to be a pattern developing here, but I had no idea what it meant.
There are many, many cancer syndromes, and when you're talking about your family history with your provider, you need to review all the known cancers in the family, and the provider needs to be trained to recognize those patterns.
Hello, my name is Diana Person, and I'm going to be doing your genetic risk assessment.
Okay.
Genetic risk assessment. It is a simple series of questions that looks at if, where, or how cancer shows up in your family history.
It's life-changing because these individuals have the opportunity to start high-risk screening, intense screening at a much earlier age.
After my initial assessment, I was considered high risk. That meant looking closer at my cancer family tree. It turns out I was a candidate for genetic testing because there was a direct connection: mother, sister, grandmother.
One of the reasons that this is critically important is for screening. It changes the age at which we would initiate your screening. It changes the intensity at which we would do your screening. So for example, instead of a mammogram once a year after the age of 40 or 50, we would do a mammogram alternating with breast MRI every 6 months, starting at a younger age.
Corey Martin is the managing editor of the KDKA-TV newsroom. His mother has been touched by cancer 3 times, so he decided to take the journey with me.
What I'd like for us to do today is go through some of your family history in a little bit more detail.
Okay.
And together we're going to build a pedigree and look at the global picture, and then together decide what your true risk is and how to proceed from here. What age did he pass away? From my understanding, it was your mother who had breast cancer twice.
The first time around, they had a lumpectomy, and then chemo and radiation.
After building Corey's family history based on the information he had, his risk was less than 20%, so there was no need for him to have genetic testing. I, on the other hand, did the testing, which is a simple blood draw. Here's what's important to note. The gene can be passed down from your mother or your father, so risk assessments are not just for women.
It's also important to continue discussing with men, even because they have their own potential risks for developing cancer, but then those men go on to be fathers and they have daughters, and if they carry that mutation, they have just as much likelihood of passing that mutation on to their daughters and their sons.
My son and daughter were a big part of me wanting to know if I carried the gene. I wanted to know if I could pass it on to them or even my new grandson.
Hi, Lynn.
Hello.
How are you?
I'm well, thank you.
Nice to see you again.
It's kind of nerve-wracking waiting for this.
I know.
After waiting just over 3 weeks for my results, on this day I learned I did not have the BRCA gene, the gene connected to either breast or ovarian cancer.
All of these were negative. So not only do we not find a mutation in any of the breast and ovarian cancer genes, we don't find any mutations in any of the known cancer syndrome genes.
The results also mean there is no risk for my son or daughter based on that particular mutation. Good news indeed. But what happens when younger women in particular are faced with a positive result?
One option would be to have preventative surgery in the case of breast or ovarian cancer. If you have your ovaries removed, that then limits your reproductive lifespan. And so a young woman who is the age of 28 or 29 is getting married and is planning her future life and family life and when to have children may make a decision to have children sooner rather than later.
Now, I should point out, because I was considered high risk, the cost of the test was covered by my insurance, but all policies are different, and if you are paying for it, the cost can range into several $100s.
So what was the worst part of waiting to find out the results?
Well, I think there's the not knowing part, but then there is looking at your options. What if it's positive? Would I have a mastectomy? Would I make that leap? I mean, I saw myself all of a sudden as Angelina Jolie. And so I think that was the hardest part, because you got to think through all these possibilities and be ready for the results, whatever they are.